The hall fell silent as they pushed her forward, the ugliest and most jealous alien woman, unwanted by all. Every gaze turned to the lone human, waiting for him to recoil, to refuse, to laugh. But he stepped forward without hesitation, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "She is mine."
The hall was filled with silence, the kind that pressed against the chest and made every breath feel heavier. They pushed her forward, the alien woman branded by her own people as the ugliest and most jealous, a creature mocked and discarded, a symbol of shame. Her steps were hesitant, her eyes lowered, her scars visible even beneath the faint shimmer of her ceremonial armor. The crowd waited for the human to recoil, to laugh, to refuse. But he did not. He stepped forward without hesitation, his gaze steady, his voice calm, claiming her as his without a trace of doubt. The air shifted. Disbelief rippled through the alien court, and she froze, unable to comprehend why a human would choose her so easily. She had lived her life surrounded by whispers, every glance a reminder of her supposed flaws. Jealousy had been her shield, a bitter armor forged from years of rejection. Yet now, standing before a man who should have recoiled, she felt something unfamiliar: confusion, vulnerability, a trembling curiosity. His eyes did not flinch at her scars. His voice did not carry mockery. He spoke as though she were worthy, as though she were more than the cruel title forced upon her. She wanted to believe it, but disbelief clawed at her chest. The human's presence was unlike anything she had known. Aliens measured worth in symmetry, perfection, logic. Humans, she realized, carried something different, an unpredictable warmth, a defiance of expectation. He did not see her as a burden. He saw her as someone to stand beside. The court murmured, their voices sharp, questioning, but he ignored them. His focus remained on her, steady and unwavering. She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes for the first time, and the world seemed to pause. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something she could not name. She whispered, almost against her will, Why didn't you hesitate?" The words trembled, fragile, as though she feared the answer would shatter her. He leaned closer, his voice low, carrying no hesitation. "Because you deserve someone who sees you." The simplicity of his words struck her harder than any blade. She had been given away as a joke, a punishment, yet he spoke as though she mattered. The alien woman's mind swirled with disbelief. She had expected rejection, cruelty, perhaps pity. Instead, she found herself staring at a man who seemed untouched by the expectations of her people. His acceptance was not logical, not calculated. It was human, raw, emotional. She felt her defenses falter, the jealousy that had defined her beginning to crack. For the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong about humans, wrong about herself. The court grew restless, their voices rising, demanding explanation. Why would a human accept what no alien wanted? He did not answer them. His silence was louder than their accusations. His hand extended, not forceful, not demanding, but open. She hesitated, her breath caught, her fingers trembling. To take his hand would mean surrendering the bitterness she had carried for so long. Yet something inside her urged her forward. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her hand in his. The contact was electric, not in the way of power, but in the way of recognition. She felt seen, not as the ugliest, not as the jealous, but as someone who mattered. His grip was firm, yet gentle, a promise without words. Her people gasped, their disbelief echoing through the hall, but she no longer cared. For the first time, she felt a spark of hope. Her thoughts raced. Was this a trick, a cruel game? Humans were unpredictable, but his eyes held no deception. They held something she had never known: sincerity. She searched his face, desperate to find a flaw, a crack in his resolve, but there was none. He stood unshaken, his presence a quiet defiance against the cruelty of her people. She wanted to speak, to challenge him, to demand why he would choose her. But the words refused to come. Instead, she felt the weight of years of rejection lifting, replaced by a fragile, unfamiliar warmth. She realized that jealousy had been born from loneliness, from the ache of never being chosen. And now, in this moment, she had been chosen. The hall seemed distant, the voices fading. All that remained was the human and the alien woman, standing together in defiance of expectation. She felt her heart soften, her armor crack, her jealousy dissolve into something she had never dared to imagine. Hope. His words echoed in her mind, simple yet powerful. Because you deserve someone who sees you. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of the moment sink in. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she was not ugly, not unwanted, not defined by jealousy. Perhaps she was simply herself, and that was enough. When she opened her eyes, she found him still watching her, his gaze steady, his presence unwavering. The alien woman whispered again, softer this time, almost to herself, "You confuse me, human." He smiled faintly, not mocking, not cruel, but warm. "Then let me keep confusing you." The words carried no logic, no calculation, but they carried something far greater, emotion. And in that moment, she realized that perhaps confusion was not something to fear. Perhaps it was the beginning of something she had longed for, but never dared to hope. Love. She sat across from him, her eyes sharp, her voice laced with suspicion. Every word she spoke was a test, every glance a challenge. She mocked his humanity, questioned his motives, tried to push him away with barbed remarks. Yet he never flinched. He answered with patience, with humor, with a warmth that seemed to disarm her more than any weapon could. She had expected cruelty, expected him to recoil at her scars, but instead he leaned closer, studying her as though she were something rare, something worth understanding. Her jealousy rose like a tide, a reflex she could not control. She accused him of pity, of playing a game, of pretending to care. But he did not retreat. He laughed softly, a sound so alien to her people yet so deeply human. That laugh unsettled her, made her wonder if perhaps he was not mocking her at all. She found herself watching him, fascinated by the way his emotions shifted so freely, unbound by logic or calculation. He was unpredictable, and that unpredictability drew her in. One evening, he spoke of her scars, not with disgust, but with admiration. He told her they were proof of survival, marks of strength. She froze, her heart twisting, convinced he was mocking her. No one had ever spoken of her scars as anything but shame. She fled, her mind consumed by the certainty that humans were cruel after all. Alone, she trembled, her jealousy burning into despair. She had wanted to believe him, but belief felt dangerous, fragile. When danger struck, it was not words that proved him true, but actions. She was wounded, her blood staining the ground, as she braced herself for betrayal. Yet he did not exploit her weakness. He knelt beside her, his hands steady, bandaging her wound with care. His touch was gentle, his eyes filled with concern. She stared at him, disbelief warring with hope. He did not see her as ugly, did not see her as jealous. He saw her as someone worth saving. Her defenses cracked. The bitterness she had carried for so long began to dissolve. She realized that jealousy had been born from loneliness, from the ache of never being chosen. And now, here was a human who chose her without hesitation, who stayed even when she tried to drive him away. She whispered, her voice trembling, "Why do you keep doing this?" He answered simply, "Because you matter." The word struck her harder than any blade, harder than any insult. She began to watch him differently. His laughter no longer felt mocking. It felt alive. His unpredictability no longer frightened her. It fascinated her. She found herself drawn to his warmth, to the way he spoke without calculation, to the way he touched her hand without hesitation. She realized that humans carried something her people did not: emotion unbound, love unmeasured, courage born not of logic but of heart. The tension between them grew, subtle yet undeniable. She caught herself staring at him, her breath quickening when his eyes met hers. He spoke of her beauty, not in the way her people defined it, but in the way he saw her strength, her resilience, her vulnerability. She wanted to deny it, wanted to cling to the bitterness that had protected her, but she could not. His words seeped into her, breaking down walls she had built over years of rejection. One night, she whispered, "You confuse me, human, but I cannot stop looking at you." He smiled, not mocking, not cruel, but warm. "Then let me keep confusing you." The words carried no logic, no calculation, but they carried something far greater: emotion. She felt her heart soften, her jealousy dissolve, her loneliness replaced by something she had never dared to imagine: hope. She realized that perhaps confusion was not something to fear. Perhaps it was the beginning of something she had longed for but never believed possible. She had been given away as a joke, as a punishment, but now she found herself chosen, not by force, not by pity, but by a human who saw her as more than her scars, more than her jealousy. She felt her world shift, her heart open, her soul awaken. The alien woman understood then that humans were different. They were unpredictable, brave, emotional. They saw beauty where others saw flaws, strength where others saw weakness. And in that difference, she found herself falling, not into jealousy, not into bitterness, but into love. The council chamber was vast, its walls shimmering with crystalline light. Every alien eye fixed on her, as though she were still the unwanted, the discarded. They demanded proof, demanded that she justify why a human had chosen her when no one else would. She stood trembling, her scars exposed, her voice caught in her throat. For a moment, the weight of years pressed down on her, the cruel title of ugliest and most jealous echoing in her mind. But before she could speak, the human stepped forward. His presence was calm, his voice steady, his words carrying a defiance that silenced the hall. He declared that her beauty was not in symmetry or perfection, but in her courage, her survival, her heart. The aliens scoffed, their logic unable to comprehend such a claim. Yet he did not falter. He spoke of how she had endured rejection, how she had carried loneliness like a burden, how she had still stood tall despite the cruelty of her people. He told them that scars were not shame, but proof of strength, that jealousy was not weakness, but the cry of someone who had longed to be loved. His words were not calculated, not logical, but they carried a power that logic could never match: emotion. The chamber grew quiet, the disbelief fading into something else, something uncertain. She stared at him, her heart pounding, her mind struggling to grasp the truth of his words. No one had ever defended her. No one had ever spoken of her as worthy. She felt her jealousy dissolve, replaced by a fierce devotion she had never known. She realized that humans were different, that they saw beyond appearances, beyond scars, beyond titles. They saw with their hearts, and in that vision, she was not ugly, not unwanted, but chosen. Her people demanded that she deny him, demanded that she cling to the logic of their world. But she could not. She felt her soul awaken, her heart open, her world transform. She stepped closer to him, her voice trembling but strong. "You confuse me, human," she whispered, "but you have given me something I never believed I could have." He met her gaze, his eyes unwavering, his presence steady. "Then let me keep giving it to you." The chamber erupted in protest, but she no longer heard them. All that mattered was the man before her, the human who had chosen her without hesitation, who had seen her when no one else did. She realized that she had been given away as a burden, but now she carried him as her heart. The jealousy that had defined her was gone, replaced by devotion, by love, by the certainty that she was no longer alone. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling, her scars visible, her vulnerability laid bare. He took her hand without hesitation, his grip firm yet gentle, a promise without words. The council fell silent, their disbelief shattered by the undeniable truth before them. She was no longer the ugliest, no longer the jealous. She was chosen, loved, transformed. Her heart melted, her soul ignited, her world forever changed. she whispered, her voice soft but powerful. They gave me to you as a burden. You carry me now as your heart. His answer was simple, his voice steady, his words unforgettable. And I will never let you go. The crystalline walls shimmered, the silence heavy, the moment eternal. She had been unwanted, mocked, discarded. But now, she was chosen, loved, cherished. The human had shown her that beauty was not in perfection, but in courage, not in symmetry, but in survival, not in logic, but in love. And in that truth, she found herself reborn.